Well, I live right outside. Technically, I'm not lived on edible watershed my whole life. I do his thing for a lot of years, Canton. Oh, yeah. All the way back down here to Canton. You know, the history that I do, I've never heard. It's all interesting. And the stuff is the primary documentation, and now we have access to these resources. Newspapers that are searching them just would not believe what I read. And then Google Books, they presented how Harvard. Yeah, I've read all of that. You heard some of this. I would believe that somebody told me he was at you would have taken
I know some others that does were you
Hang on there. How you doing,
I just was telling her coming in. I worked for months in this church. When we went to the other building, it was like it smells. Yeah. And I know I know a lot out of the pulpit. Oh, I've left the churches in here. I read her, told us
We'll make sure he's down there.
They say they got
You get a chance, check him out the other. I will. Yeah, certainly will. I gotta get him, gotta get something. He bummed out about it. I'll do it. I'll do it.
That was surprise. Yes, it was. And I heard it from I can hear out both of them now. I hear better out of this one than I do this one. But I usually say it, you know, what? So it did that.
Just now, how you been?
Just I'm sure she probably did. One
One foot for the other.
and her business
One day at a
is actually repeating. She does. That's what she does.
And I got to get home.
Where you been keeping yourself busy? Are you better? How sick were you? Somebody better?
I'm better.
This is Thursday, May the 3rd. This is our regular council work session. And if you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for all that are here. We appreciate the opportunity to be a part of what goes on in this city. We ask that we all think about what we are doing here, make it the best decision for all of our citizens. All these things we pray. In your name. Amen.
welcome everyone here. Before we move into our agenda consideration, we have a couple of awards we'd like to make. A life-saving award proclamation for Corporal Denise Berry and Officer Chris Harris and Officer Dwight Tipton. All of y'all here? They're here. If you would come forward, please.
I didn't want to hog the limelight, so wanted to sit back in the shadow there.
In fact, I will let you,
You want me to go ahead and do this here?
introduce them and tell the story.
Absolutely. Thank you, by the way, Mayor and Council, for giving me the opportunity to recognize 3 of our officers. On March 30th of this year, at approximately 9 o'clock in the evening, I think that was a Friday. Was it Friday? I think it was a Friday evening. We had an incident down on Riverstone Parkway where a driver in a pickup truck traveling with his daughter suffered a seizure. As a result of the seizure, the driver veered off of the roadway on Riverstone Parkway, went through the fence, and there at the intersection of Juniper Street and Riverstone Parkway, if you know where that's at, there's a Days Inn right there with a very small swimming pool. Unfortunately, the driver of the vehicle lost control of the vehicle, crashed through the fence, and actually ended up in the swimming pool with his daughter and himself inside. The driver was still suffering from the seizure at the time that the vehicle went into the water. Our officers arrived very shortly thereafter. These 3 officers jumped into the swimming pool, were able to get the doors open and the windows open on the vehicle, and were able to extricate both the driver and the daughter from the vehicle as it was filling with water. So, because of their efforts that night, they quite possibly saved the life of the driver and certainly saved the life of the daughter. And because of their efforts, I'd like to take a moment and just recognize each of them with this certificate. Corporal Denise Berry. Thank you very much. Officer Chris Harris. Thank you very much. Officer Dwight Tipton. Thank you very much.
I could too. I would just like to read this proclamation, which will be presented to each of these officers here. Whereas on March 30th, 2012, the Canton Police Department responded to a vehicle accident at the intersection of Riverstone Parkway and Juniper Street, where a vehicle had left the roadway and was sinking in the swimming pool at Days Inn. Excuse me. Whereas several officers were on the scene and in the swimming pool attempting to get the driver out of the vehicle, who was found to be actively seizing, and were able to remove the driver from the vehicle, who was then transported to Northside Cherokee Hospital. Whereas the driver's daughter was also in the vehicle at the time of the accident and was later released to the custody of her mother, who stated that the driver had a history of epileptic and grand mal seizures. And whereas, while placing themselves in imminent danger, Corporal Denise Berry, Officer Chris Harris, and Officer Dwight Tipton performed purposeful, distinctive, and successful life-saving acts on other human beings. Now therefore be it resolved, the Mayor and Council of the City of Canton do hereby express their warm appreciation and gratitude to Corporal Berry, Officer Harris, and Officer Tipton for their dedicated service as police officers for the City of Canton and its citizens. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Yes.
Does anybody have a cell phone with photos? I would like to get some photos made of this.
I do, but I don't know how to use it.
You know how to use it, Jack? No.
You had to use a phone, though.
Look, he knows how to use a cell phone.
An inside joke.
Of course.
This is not a political deal, right?
Absolutely.
Only until the next election.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Good to see you.
All right, consideration to approve our agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
make a motion, we approve the agenda with the following exceptions. Under old business, item A, be removed and placed on the June work session meeting because we're not ready to discuss that procedure. And under new business, item E, discussion in regard to request for prepayment of water and sewer taps for Northside Hospital project also be removed because Mr. Hausfeld of Northside, representing Northside, is not here to discuss it and then asked for it to be put on a later session.
okay, so that would be the June discussion session?
Yes.
Okay, okay. We have a motion that we approve the agenda with the two changes, that being old business number A, discussion of procedure for cemetery management and fund dispersal, be moved to a work session. And item E under new business, which is discussion in regard to request for prepayment of water and sewer taps for Northside Hospital Cherokee. Do we have a second? Second. Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voting for the approval of the agenda. Okay. We have a consideration to approve the April 29, 2012 minutes. It is included in your package, agenda package. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Okay. Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve these agendas. Minutes. Yes, sir.
I'll not be voting, yes, I was
Okay. You will abstain. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Let the minutes reflect that council member Rush abstained since he was not here at that meeting. Okay. You have in your package also the March financials for for informational purposes there. So, if anyone has any discussion regarding those. Okay. Now we will go into our 10-minute public input period. And we have a number of people who have signed up here. Neil Magruder, first up.
First up.
Mr. Mayor and council members, I'm here to plead for the preservation of the Jabez Galt House on Marietta Road. I must disagree with the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation to accept Mr. Latimer's plan for the property. This house dates to 1842. We Galts had a consistent oral history concerning the building of this house. It stated that Jabez Galt, my great-great-grandfather, only lived 8 years after he built the house in question. He died in 1850, which makes the construction date 1842. Easy math. Imagine my surprise and chagrin when I read an article in the Cherokee Tribune attributed the building and original ownership to a Mr. Thomas Neal White. Information provided by the Cherokee County Historical Society's documentation. I immediately asked my friend Richard Wright, who is as familiar with the old records in our courthouse as I am with my own library, to start a property search. Within very few days, he successfully proved the J.D. Scott story, which has been common knowledge for most of time. The survey to which the Historical Society referred was spurious, and one wonders why erroneous information is being disseminated and then published when we have such fine records in our courthouse available to all. I would appreciate a thorough retraction of the article and the record correctly written. There's often great power in the written word, even when the word is untrue. Within hours, I had a phone call from Dot White Patterson, who is here tonight, asking my opinion of the Tribune article. She is the great-great-granddaughter of Mr. Thomas Neal White. She agreed with my opinion and further told me that Thomas Neal White was her great-great-grandfather and that her family lore confirmed that he rented the Galt house. Dot lives just across Marietta Road from the house. My objection to Mr. Latimer's plan is its encroachment toward the historic house, well into the lot on which it stands. Also, there is a large area for parking which almost touches a rear corner of the historic building. I fear the increase in population and the juxtaposition of duplexes and traffic activity will ultimately spell the final destruction of a valuable historic residence. Who will police retaining the facade? Who will enforce Mr. Latimer's promise to preserve the remaining original fabric of the old place? To the Mayor and Council, I implore you to look again at the small space for many buildings and at the idea of only 45 parking spaces for 10 units in 5 duplexes and a population of you name it. It isn't realistic. All the structures to be built will occupy barely more than 1 acre of the property. And look again at the planting of Leyland cypresses. They do not shield the old house from the encroaching new construction. It is almost impossible to imagine the loss of aesthetic value of the 19th century residence. The usage of the property is, in my mind, a travesty. I believe Mr. Latimer will find other available properties that better suit his development without impinging upon a uniquely historic building for which he would hold responsibility. There are other solutions and possibilities for preserving the old house. I served for 6 years on the board of the Georgia Trust for Historic Preservation and was privileged to participate on its revolving fund committee. This group comprises architects, lawyers, doctors, restorers, all people interested in preserving the past. In some cases, the trust purchases places threatened with decay or demolition and finds buyers interested in restoring those properties. A thorough study is done by the committee and the restoration resources available to the trust. Canton Textile Mill is a sort of example of what can be done. Was pinpointed by the trust, for instance, and a private firm bought the building and renovated it into mill loft apartments. I'm still serving in an advisory capacity for the trust. I voted only a few days ago to sell a house temporarily owned by the revolving fund to an interested restorer. I asked the trust to list Canton Grammar School on its places in peril, which they did over 2 years ago. But Dr. Petrosello has chosen to padlock the building, obscuring the interior. However, the architect who restored Canton High School assured us that the grammar school is in fine shape for restoration. These are possibilities for the Galt House, and there are others. I would like now to introduce Richard Wright, who is a published historian, also a master carpenter, someone who has seen the interior of the Galt House. I've never been in it. I think he can give a good account of the value of saving such buildings and of the rarity of residences of this age. I know he feels the proposed construction probably will destroy the Galt House in years to come, and I value his opinion. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for the opportunity, and I'm gonna try not to be long-winded here. I never pass up an opportunity to talk about the uniqueness of the history of Canton. The fact that we've got an incredible amount of documents, and our county goes back to 1832, and the documents are here. We've got property records, court records, and historical newspapers that tell an excellent story about the history of Canton. And I read the newspaper article that Nell brought up, and I didn't see any accuracy whatsoever on it. This particular house was the property was purchased in 1840. To put that in some kind of perspective, the Indians were removed in 1838. Atlanta was the lots were sold in Atlanta in 1847. So this is one of the oldest houses that is in this part of the country. And it's been here for quite some time. And I went in it probably 6 months ago. The owners, I spoke with them and went inside. And it's actually got quite a bit of the original fabric inside the house. And I would be willing to say that there's probably not 3 dozen houses this old in the entire part of North Georgia. And I don't know what y'all want to do or what y'all can do, but I certainly want to make sure that you base your decisions on facts. And this is an old house. It's a significant house. And it would have been considered a type of, it was much larger than average house. And it was it's significant in a lot of ways. I was in the courthouse today and looking at old historic newspapers. And you could tell a book about you could write a book about the situation surrounding that house and use it as a basis. And I know that these things get destroyed and they can't ever come back. So whatever y'all decide, I hope you'll base it on good hard facts. And from what I saw in the newspaper and the piece that the Cherokee County Historical Society put out, that's not accurate at all. And the records are there. They speak for themselves. I pulled them up, and anybody who's interested, I'd be happy to go on for some time about this, but that's all I'll say for now.
Sir,
Yes.
tell me how that property's being cared for now, and who lives in it, who owns it?
I spoke with the previous owner. I don't know. I'm just a John Q. Public. Knocked on the door, came in the house, and it's in pretty good shape. The original ceilings, floors are in the original part of the house. There's been an addition to the back of the
When
house.
all these records are there, surely we know who owns them now.
I stopped my records in 1906. So I pulled up I did the title search from 1832 to 1906, and I don't have any of the more modern stuff than that.
Mr. Latimer, do we assume you own this? Y'all own this, right?
Yes.
Okay. So they own.
I'm just basing what I'm saying off of what I read out of the newspaper, what I know, and what I found.
Is it occupied now?
Yes, it is. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Okay, Melissa Castile, Woodstock. Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Melissa Castile, and I'm actually here to speak on behalf of supporting the application by Mr. Latimer for the rezoning of this property. And just to give you the case in a nutshell, the properties were blanket rezoned, I think in the 90s, to OP. I think there was a lot of consideration given to the size or shape or what have you of the properties at that time. Because when you look at how they lay out now, really the ordinances that would have to be applied to the property to use it for OP to get the economic value out of it for the owner would almost negate the properties. There's one that's a tiny wedge pie shape, and the biggest impact really, other than the fact that there's a major grade change on those properties from the road up to them, so that marketing them for office professional, which is what they're zoned for now, it would be very, very difficult. You'd almost have to grade down the site so that you'd have a visibility to the property for marketing of the property. The second thing is the 50-foot buffer that's required by the ordinances between OP and residential zoning. It nearly wipes out half the property the way that they sit as they are now. So again, it goes back to these owners being able to utilize these properties economically viably. You know, I mean, putting an office complex in there now, it would just wipe the property out. And regarding the home that's there, Mr. Latimer has every intent to preserve it. He's already been in there working on it to preserve it. He's taken measures to keep some of the integrity of the architecture versus changing some things out that may not make sense. It's kind of a small point, but it's an effort he's put. He's put some air conditioning into it. They've updated lighting, appliances, and so forth. So there's also gardens that they found around the property that were covered up because it's been abandoned for 15 months. It's been on the market for 15 months. And they're going to, maintain those and effectively restore them so that that doesn't go away. They surround the back end of the property. Because in a nutshell, what I'm saying is that the biggest concern here is not rezoning this property is going to make it a hardship on these property owners to be able to utilize the property as it's zoned. Go to change it to OP and it wipes the use of the property, the land that's available for use out. And it's hard for me to explain that without maybe your packets, I don't know if they sent around to you that apply to the properties. I've got a couple of copies I could give you. And you can see this piece here. I mean, that's, gosh, 58 feet across the front. So 50-foot buffer just wipes it out. One more comment is that all the proposed plans for the property would follow the zoning to the T. There's nothing unusual is being asked for. There's been agreement that the condition of preserving the house would be followed, also putting privacy fence and screening more than what's been asked of the Planning Commission around the rear and side property boundaries. And circulation into these properties too is actually going to be improved. Right now there's shared drives effectively in some situations, so that'll get improved. All of these things would happen if it was developed as it currently is now. Wouldn't change, this is not going to change, a potential amounts of people on the property. It's developed as OP as it can be now. You're going to have trips in and out of there, probably more than you would with just homeowners. You're going to have potential for parking, which would possibly be more than what you see here, and may not have anybody conditioning that this house be preserved as it is right now in the Planning Commission's recommendations. Thank you.
Is there a separate parcel? Is that parcel segregated out for where the old house is, or is it on let the merge with all the other?
They would be merged. There's 3 parcels that would be merged together.
So could it be segregated out with an X amount of property around that house?
And we have to look at further to go back to the zoning ordinance about the units, there's minimum requirements for the size and shapes of the lots per the different zonings, and we couldn't create a non-conforming lot. So we'd have to look at that on paper. I couldn't really answer that 100% right now.
Anyone have any other questions, sir?
I have one thing. With our packet, we received a big package of, from one of the neighbors who was objecting to the rezoning. Has that neighbor been pacified, or is she still in the same?
I can't speak for her. I know that Mr. Latimer and I met with her about a week or so ago and discussed some of the issues of trespassing from the current residents on Mr. Latimer's property, and and things of that sort. So they had some discussions about what could be done better with communication and with development of the site during construction and post-construction for this project. Just to reiterate to you what the pictures were that I handed out to you, Mr. Latimer has a property next door that has construction to the level that you're seeing in the pictures. He also has a property that backs up to that the pictures are from, and you can see the quality of renovation from that greenhouse. I mean, that was the before and the brick is the after. So he would be doing work like the similar level quality to any new construction there. And again, high quality standards for keeping the architectural integrity of the golf house.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you. Sharon, is it Rainey? Maybe it's not Sharon. Somebody from Rolling Green Drive here? Okay. Your writing's not that bad, I just,
Sorry.
I'm not reading it that way.
I'm Susan Ramage, and I am the neighbor who is opposed to this. And I won't take but a minute except to express my continued opposition to it. I did meet with Mr. Latimer, and he did agree to cut all the trees back to the property line and install a fence there. And that's part of my opposition, is getting rid of that buffer. They mentioned creating a hardship to them to not change the zoning. Well, if you change the zoning, then you create a hardship for the neighbors. And they bought it with an OP zoning and with a 50-foot buffer in place. So, and now they're asking to change it based on that being a hardship. And
Now, you have an Ackworth address?
I do. This is.
Do you live over here?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, no. This is property that was my grandparents and parents that we inherited.
Okay, gotcha.
And I'm just, as having them as the development beside my property, I've had a lot of problems, which I detailed in the package that you got. And and to answer further your question about the house and the 10 units that are proposed, I have seen the proposal that was submitted to the city, and those 10 units and the house are on 1 acre. That was my understanding, and then they explained to me basically that they have to cut all the trees to make room for all those units. So that it's just very, very dense, in my opinion. But,
Susan,
yes, sir.
is this your property here?
Trying to figure out. No, here. The road is here. This is the property that's in question. These partially. There's 3 properties. There's 3 parcels to rezone, and I'm here. This is their first phase.
Okay, thank you. Did I understand you correctly? It's 10 units per acre?
The proposal that I have seen puts 10 units onto the plot with the what I call the net house. I'm sorry, that's what I grew up knowing it as. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Is it 5 duplexes? Is that what you're saying? 5
yes.
duplexes, yes.
And then my understanding from meeting with the city, Green at the city, they have an additional property next door that if this is approved, they would build another, they have the option of building another 4 duplexes. So there'll be 14 total units on that property.
Anyone else have a question? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, that's all we have there. Okay. Items to consider for the consent agenda under old business. We have moved A, so we'll go to B, discussion of the SCADA system location, and C, probably that'll be discussed together perhaps, discussion of the reservoir building.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
The reason I didn't ask for a removal from the agenda at the beginning was I thought some update would be good to, during this discussion, to give to the rest of the council and the concerned citizens here. We did a memorandum of understanding, I believe it was August of last year with Cobb County Marietta Water Authority, and basically had not received any solid response back to that memo of understanding. And being new to the council, I questioned why we weren't sitting down and talking, and through Mr. Beresford's leadership, we were able to arrange a meeting which was held this week, and met with them and came to the understanding that they owed us a correction, or if they didn't like our memo of understanding, to come back and revise it and submit to us a memo of understanding which we would review. We at the same time agreed relative to the building that they would submit a revised plan to us, in which you have established a committee called the Reservoir Committee that Mr. Beresford chairs, that they would submit to us a revised detailed plan that we could review in committee and then bring to council. And then this goes also along with the SCADA system. So to discuss this tonight before the committee reviews what has been promised to us, or what I understand has been promised to us, and Mr. Beresford, you can correct me if I'm stating it wrong, we really need to see their proposed response to our memo of understanding and come forth back to us. Another point that was discussed, and should be probably included in their memo of understanding, is that they had voted 6-0 in their board to reject our request to remove clause 702, which was the right of first refusal on us discussing with any other entity, including Cherokee County, possibility their ownership of the reservoir. This, they concurred that they discussed in the meeting, and there was no decision made, but they didn't express any objection to us discussing with Cherokee County or other entities that they first knew by name that they would either give a consent to discuss with them, or denial if they thought it was a bad future partner. Therefore, that would be also included, in my opinion, in the memo of understanding coming back to us. So to discuss these at this time is premature.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Also agreed at that time is that we would need to have the revised office building estimate of cost. And I understood that there was some cuts made in the office building, but we have not seen any facts on that yet. So we want to look at that first. We need to get that MOU back as the start. And then once we have that, then we can come back to council with a recommendation on the building. So there's a couple of steps that have to take place. And one of the things we found out, which to me was a major disappointment, was they received our MOU with no response. And when we questioned that, they said, that was our response. No response. Well, to me that was unacceptable. So we've asked for that MOU to be in our hands before we move on with anything else. So we're at an impasse until we have those documents.
I spoke to Mr. Hatabian today. I think there's not a clear understanding on the part of staff as to what we need to be doing with respect to soliciting some clear costs. Yeah, because I'm not sure that he's clear about, I think there was a committee meeting, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, with Mr. Cummins and Mr. Bryan and Heath Lee from Cobb Marietta, and I think Heath understood coming out of that meeting that committee wanted staff to proceed with soliciting bids. Is that correct or incorrect?
No.
Okay. Help us.
I wasn't there to know the answer.
Heath,
to clarify that, I'd asked several times because we had heard all these numbers. The original building was $410,281 with allowances of $89,750 on top of that. It was $500,000 for a building of 1,800 square feet and a garage of 900. And I'd asked for details because this seemed exorbitant. And in discussing it with Heath, Mr. Bryan and I did discuss this with Heath. We went through several items and questioned them. And in discussions with Mr. Hatavian, at the meeting we had this week, I mentioned those items and he says, well, they're removed. Well, what I'd like to do is take that same detailed list that we have, which is pretty extensive, and go through and see where those prices have changed. Because we can sit and say, well, it's going to be $300,000, but what I don't know is, in detail, why does the building have to be the size that it is? One of the items in this detail was, for example, a projection system of $1,600 in a conference room to be located at the reservoir. I have a question is, why do we even need a conference room at the reservoir? So this whole list needs to be discussed by the committee that Mr. Beresford does chair. And once we look at this list, we should be able to come back and say, our new estimate is X dollars. And then we're ready to move forward. But again, like I said, this is a pretty extensive 5 or 6 page list in detail that's never been addressed.
But it sounds like what you're saying, Mr. Cummings, is that we need to wait on the committee to meet again and go through that list before staff solicits support and quote.
No.
See, that's why we're confused.
No. I want Dave said he's taking some stuff out. I want him to bring forward what he's taken out.
To the committee.
To the committee. But he's got to put those, before we meet, and we don't know what the numbers are. So we want to have that at the committee meeting, that he needs to have that.
Yeah, I totally concur that the committee meeting is dependent upon Mr. Hatavian coming forward with, I guess, the revised cost estimate, at which we can then look at what really is included, and the committee can discuss those items that may also be considered to be changed or removed that he hasn't removed, and then come back to council.
Yeah, Mr. Wood, when that presentation was made a month ago, those issues were discussed, and those issues were, let's look at it, cut out the fat. I might not say cut out the fat, but that's what I'm asking for. And that should have been done. So it wasn't done. Then we found out this week that 2 things have been dropped out of that with no dollar value to it. We don't know what that was worth. I went through just a quick look. I knocked out $86,000 that is not needed. So we need to have that. So the quicker we can get that document, where we can sit down and talk and dialogue with him, the better off it will be. We can move that ahead. But it's important to understand, we will not bring the council until we get the MOU. We need to get the MOU and see what they're offering, and then we'll make the move on these. Step 1, step 2.
Is that reasonable?
Dave, do you have what you need to accommodate that request, though, in terms of the specifics of what was to be deleted?
Yes.
Okay, that's not good.
So I would assume that once that information is assembled, that you would let them know and they would have opportunity to discuss that. Okay. Anyone else on those 2 items? If not, we'll go to item D and E. D is the approval of the Wallowska Street water line replacement contract, and E is the approval of the North Street water line replacement contract. These are a result of the streetscape project of Wallowska Street, and we did talk about that, I think, before, and asked that come before this committee meeting as and this is a work session, but we moved it from our last meeting because it is an urgent request.
We need a motion on that.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the Waleska Street water line replacement contract.
Can we do both of them at the same time?
We sure can.
Is that real not to?
Well, just to state the dollar amounts
Okay.
separately, yes, to approve the expenditure up to a dollar amount.
Yes.
I don't know what else.
Who's got that?
I got it somewhere.
One was 75, something, the other was 98.
Joe, you got the
Susan's got the
exact.
contract.
Yeah, I would like to go ahead and state that these are estimates. If you do put a dollar amount on it, add 10%, something like that, to give us just a little bit of fluff. As you know, these things always do
Right,
tend
so, I
to
mean,
change.
we're approving a contract with a price.
Yeah,
It
with
doesn't
this.
say an estimate, it's supposed to be a price.
It states some, build on actual quantity. We have some minor exclusions.
Okay, so that means we're approving an actual written contract.
Yeah,
or whatever.
if we have to come back with some of those minor exclusions, we can bring those back if you want to stay to that.
Well, maybe the dollar amount doesn't have to be stated, but I mean, we're approving the proposed contract.
Well, what you usually do is not more than up to this level.
Well, if you want to put a cap on it, but I think that if you approve the contract, they have a price in them. If there's a change order that has to come back, they'll bring it back.
Do the contract have a total price or just a unit price only?
A total price with some exclusions and some
By
assumptions.
by exclusions, what do you mean by that?
Contingencies based on existing soils. If they get out there and they determine they need an extra retainer gland or something to tie into what, we don't have an exact idea as to what's underground, say in front of the historic courthouse. Minor exclusions.
And that's all normal.
It's very normal.
Maybe the motions can just identify the person we're contracting with, so that we know what we're talking about. The minutes just need to tie into a document, is all I was really trying to do.
You want one? I got the amounts. Sure.
Yeah, what is the amount in the contract?
The North Street bid, the low bidder is $75,808.18.
And who was the contractor?
And it's Georgia Development Partners.
Okay,
And the Waleska Street bid is $98,984.25.
and that contractor, same
Same
contract?
contractor there.
They were the low bidder of 3 bids that I have in front of me.
Okay. Any other questions on that? You made a motion?
Right, you said the name, you need the name.
Yeah, we just named them there.
Georgia
We got that.
Georgia Development.
And we have a second.
I'll second it.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voted for the motion.
That was the vote. The motion was the vote.
Both, yes. Under new business, discussion of downtown bike lanes. Got to, I'm not sure, did we just forward that from the last meeting to this?
We had a study to be done and looked at, and I think Ginger did get with Joby. Right? Where'd he go? Oh, there you have it. And came up with some conclusions. We had this email sent to us so that we'll give us some answers.
Jody, you've taken a look at that?
Yeah, I have taken a brief look at it. Ginger had some opinions on it based on her theories, and basically when she had gotten together with me and sent me a draft copy of the email that she sent you guys, I was already under the same opinion. And what I've got here for you guys to look at is I would like to give you a little bit more information and research that I've found, which I think is typical in bidding, entire situation in the city. It basically speaks about some analysis of some other cities comparable that's tried the same thing, and they talk about door zones, and they list statistics on the number of accidents and the possibilities of fatalities. And in my opinion, I agree with that we should not try and squeeze any bike lanes around the downtown loop. But I would like to give you guys this link to this email for some, so you can develop your own personal opinions. I think it'll be clear to you. And if you have any questions by the next meeting, feel free to email me, and I'll do my best to get you an answer. So I'd like to give this to Susan, if you wouldn't mind letting me.
Does anybody have any particular questions at this point regarding that matter?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I went downtown, did a couple of test runs by pulling into the 45-degree angle parking spaces and then speeding out backwards, getting out, and a number of cars were swerving out of my way because you can't see anything when you back out until you actually get out in the lane. And if you had somebody on a bicycle coming down, you're looking for the car as best you can, and there is a tendency that you won't see a biker, and to me it's very dangerous, and I just see that that would be a major handicap for the pedestrians downtown, for the shoppers downtown, or anything else to be able to try to squeeze in bike lanes. To me, it's bad enough just backing out without having bikers in the way.
Right. I think that probably we should go ahead and move this to our next meeting so that we can give someone a conclusion and an answer to this request. It's good.
Yeah, I would like to say that I got a call from someone about bike lane at the Heritage Park. You all may have gotten one as well. Person was almost run over again. This is something that's happened before. And when I mentioned it to my dad, he said, yeah, I got hit over there the other day too. So it's something that's happening, and it's very simple things. I think we talked about it before, but I think we still need to do something about it pretty quick, and that is put the bikes in one direction and people walking in another direction.
I think that's on the agenda a little further. We'll do it, but I tend to agree with you there. Bring it up again.
Well, with regard to the bike lanes downtown, I tend to agree with Mr. Beresford that it's utterly dangerous. If you have no parking, perhaps you could have a bike lane, but with parking on both sides of the street, it's difficult.
I can't see how you can retrofit what we have there to accommodate that at this point.
Mr. Mayor, at one point, it might not hurt to think about adding some bike racks or something on both ends of town. People can, ride bikes into town, lock their bikes up, stroll around town, shop, eat, back on their bike, drive back home. That would be about the extent of what I see would be safe.
Do you think bike lanes on Main Street going towards the library would be safe? I mean, that's scary.
I would say sidewalk there as far as.
If you let them on the sidewalk there, then they'd be riding on the sidewalk downtown, which is against the law.
We would assume that they can ride on down Main Street, but they don't have the, even downtown, they don't have the business doors open.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I feel that we've had a discussion, I feel that we have a general consensus here that this is not something we want to pursue, and I don't see why we need to bring it forward to another meeting. We don't need to vote on it, it's just a discussion.
Everyone of that opinion?
Yep.
Yes. Done deal then. Okay. It's off the agenda for the next meeting. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Discussion of the open record request policy and procedure. You have as one of your attachments a process by which open records may be obtained through the city when they are actually requested under that format. I would expect certainly that in most cases, when a citizen or a media requests an open record that is obviously public information, without any doubt that it would just be given to them without having to go through that channel. But if they chose to do so, then that would formalize the process a little bit by submitting an open records request, because at that point it is a formal process, it is a legal process, and the clock starts ticking at that point. So I would like to applaud certainly our city clerk for taking this on. At one point, we tried to do something similar to this, but not as detailed. And it didn't get through at that point, but Susan has provided this information and certainly would welcome any discussion on the procedure that she has recommended here.
The only question I would have is do we have any time limit from when the open records request is made to when it needs to be delivered?
Yes. In 3 days, or you have to get back with, as I understand it, get back with the person. If you see you can't get it in the 3 days, you have to give them a time frame. Is that correct?
You have to respond in some fashion in 3 days, whether it's telling you to get it later, you know what you have, and I'll get this later, or here they are. And it's 3 business days.
Mr. Mayor, the only issue, and not that I don't want all departments to be able to receive it, the problem is if a department receives a written request and gets busy and it sits there, we're exposed to no control over this time limit. And in my personal opinion, and I think we're allowed under the under this Open Records Act to designate a person who can receive that. And I think we should designate the city clerk to receive every open records request and let her disperse those to those that might fill it. But she has then a method of logging them in and controlling that they are filled within the time frame specified under the law. If it's a verbal request, it's not a problem to fill it because there are neither civil nor criminal penalties, if I understand it, if the time frame isn't adhered to. So if somebody just makes a verbal request, they can, you know, and we don't fill it within 3 days, there's no penalty assessed to us. But if a written request goes, say, to, it doesn't matter, the finance department, and they get busy doing something else, and it doesn't get filled in 3 days, we're exposed to a penalty or exposed to not complying with the law.
Anyone else?
Well,
Be sure, go ahead.
I read it as the city clerk is going to be the ultimate responsibility that everything is funneled through. So,
The only point I says is that's true, but what if it comes into a department that doesn't get forwarded in the correct amount of time? The clerk has no idea that that request has even been made. Whereas if the department that gets requested, somebody walks in and requests, if they say, I'm sorry, all written requests must go to the city clerk, they have to take it to the city clerk and hand it to them.
okay, counterpoint on that. This is an open record request policy and procedure. All department heads should be very versed in this procedure. And therefore, that falls back into, I would say, Mr. Wood's category, where he would have the department heads, staff, personnel, make sure everybody understands that. Because we can almost do multiple work, but we've got to have one. We're looking at for one. We're looking at our city clerk.
I think you have to recognize too that the city clerk is the record keeper for the city. That's the duty there. And being the record keeper, and I think that assumes all records, basically, responsibility to some degree, that, you know, if you want to get a city record through an open records request, I would think that would be the natural path you would take, would be the city clerk to make that request. If you want to go to the planning and zoning department and get a copy of an application for a zoning request, assuming that's public record, then, you know, I would think you could just go there, can I get this? And I would assume that it would be handed to you, if it's obvious that it is an open record. But once again, I think that the term open record request sets a path that is more formal and for which there are legal consequences for not complying. And you know, if they go to one department and they make a request, and as Mr. Cummins had indicated there, how clerk know whether the request had even been made or not, essentially at the time, and complied with it.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Well, the second time tonight, I'm agreeing with Mr. Beresford. That's a management problem. And if any manager or any department gets an open records request, they better darn well turn it over to the city clerk, otherwise there should be an administrative policy and a problem for them.
I'd just like to address that. The problem is this, the law, as Mr. Cummings said, is we can't get in any trouble if the person hasn't followed our procedure. So our procedure needs to say very clearly that all written requests go to the clerk. We don't want anybody taking them other than the clerk. Oral requests are different. If they go to the police department and say, give me a copy of that citation, they copy, they give them to them. But if anybody says, here's a written request, they need to say, take that to the clerk. Because that's the only way we're going to be able to say, you didn't do it properly. If we've left it unclear about that, and I don't remember what it says, I read it, but it doesn't need to be unclear. It does not be, and it can't be direct everybody to give them to the clerk. We should tell people, you take it to the requester, has to come to the
Then
clerk.
the manager of that department person should say, I can't accept this.
I don't accept written requests.
Right.
Exactly, they go to the clerk.
It's like I remember a story about a receptionist got a telephone call that said, this is a bomb threat. She said, we don't accept bomb threats here.
The problem is, they get all kinds of requests. They get them verbally and they just get the information over. And what we're trying to avoid is confusion, where somebody can say, you didn't respond in 3 days, I'm going to sue you, or I'm going to turn you to the Attorney General. We need to be able to say, well, you didn't follow the policy.
Okay.
So however that needs to be accomplished.
Then we need to make that our policy that all, because oral requests, if they say open record request, and I think even if they don't, an oral request is good. Unless we make our policy
No, the
that
new law
way.
changes that. The verbal request, the difference is this, we're not under any penalty for failing to respond to an oral request, because they're gonna have to follow the law. It's not the words, because people don't, I think people come and say, oh, I want some records, and we say, oh, you want an open records request. We put the words in their mouth. We shouldn't do that, and it shouldn't be verbally kicked into a higher place. If somebody says, I'd like this record, and I don't know how you respond, but if somebody says, I'd like this record, and we think, well, that's a big deal, we need that in writing to be clear what you're asking for. And we really ought to encourage it to be in writing, so there's no misunderstanding as to what they're requesting, because we get that too. We thought you wanted this, no, what you want this, and there's phone calls, there's back and forth. That's what needs to be eliminated, but I don't think that we ought to worry about the verbal ones. We should comply if we can, and make them put it in writing if we can.
That's sent her to the clerk, who's going to record it.
Right. I mean, then the clerk can say, here's who needs to fill it for me, but at least I'm keeping track of it.
Would you work with Susan to refine what we have now to conform to what maybe you're saying we need to do?
The problem is 3 days is very short for it to be going between people, and so the instinct is to, let's cut that out, but I think unfortunately we're going to have to do it.
I think also in the law, the time doesn't start until it hits the designated person either. Isn't that correct? In other words, if it comes in the mailroom, it doesn't matter that it takes a day to get to Susan or wherever.
And Susan's response could be, call the person up and say, we'll get them to you. You've now complied. All we have to do is say they are available and we're getting them. So I think it would aid in that you could buy some time just by responding within the 3 days. But the 3 days is the biggest problem, and where people are going to start getting mad.
Okay? Anyone else on that? Item C, discussion of planning commission recommendation, cases E 1203-001, West Latimer, first reading.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. This is a discussion of the planning commission recommendation, KC 1203 The applicant is Mr. Wes Latimer. Property is located at 630, 650, and 690 Marietta Road, land lot 165, 14th District, 2nd Section, Cherokee County. Further described as tax map 91N18, parcels D020, D021, and D022. The three parcels contain a total of 2.15 acres. Mr. Latimer is requesting that the property be rezoned from OP Office Professional to R2A, two-family residential. The Canton Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 16, 2012 in regards to this rezone application. The Planning Commission recommended that the City of Canton rezone the subject property to R2A with conditions. The proposed conditions are as follows. Number one, the existing house, known as the Galt House, shall be preserved. The historical exterior character shall be maintained. Number two, fencing and leyland cypress shall be installed along the rear property line. I'm here to answer any questions the mayor or council members might have in regards to this. This is the first reading, no action, no requested.
Any questions? Is a question I would have, would it be possible for that house to be sectioned out and maintained on a separate parcel from the other properties and still have access in case in the future sometime that house were some kind of museum or something? I don't know.
We would have to get with Mr. Latimer and their designer in regards to the requirements of R2A zoning. It does allow for single-family residential with a minimum 10,000 square foot area for that structure. For two-family homes, it does require 6,000 square foot for each unit within the two-family residential units within that R2A zoning, and we just have to do some design work to see if everything would work out. Mr. Latimer did purchase three parcels originally. They have been combined into the 2.15 acres. The R2A zoning does allow for 7.26 units per acre. That's where the 5 to 10 units, the 5 duplex units came from that he has proposed with his preliminary zoning site plan.
Mr. Rush?
The question I have is the historical house, what is the plans for that house other than to restore it and maintain? Will it be occupied or will it be?
Mr. Latimer plans to maintain it as a residence. He has given no indications that it would be, if you will, used as a duplex rental unit. Mr. Latimer is in the audience if you want to ask the applicant directly. He indicated that he was going to maintain the home and that it would be as basically a single-family home.
Thank you.
Mr. Patton,
Yes, sir.
would you show me here on the map where this buffer with the leland cypress and separate stuff is not identified?
Talking about the conditions on approval, that would be located along the rear property line in this area here.
So nothing over here to shield the property or the house?
That was not part of the conditions recommended by the planning commission. Staff would try to work with Mr. Latimer in regards to additional protection measures for the Galt House. I believe that their designer that spoke in the 10-minute public input section also referenced that they found some garden areas and some things of that nature that they look to preserve and enhance and that sort of thing. Again, that is just a preliminary zoning site plan.
Mr. Patton, help me a little bit. I was confused earlier. Were you here earlier when they were talking about this?
Yes, sir.
There was a mention of 10 units on 1 acre or 5 duplexes on 1 acre, and you're talking
2.15 acres.
What's correct?
2.15 acres, there were 3 individual pieces of property. They have been combined into one parcel of land containing 2.15 acres of land. The original golf house was on an individual piece of property prior to this combination of the 3 parcels, if you will, in which that house sat on approximately 1 acre. That there are 3 pieces that have been combined into one.
Mr. Rush?
Mr. Mayor, according to our administrative code, a resident or a person of the audience can't speak on a council agenda item unless the council approves it. So I'm asking if council will allow Mr. Latimer to tell us on what he plans to do with the golf house. Second.
Motion is second. Any other discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No? Okay. Mr. Latimer?
I plan on just keeping it as, one single-family resident, and I'm definitely going to restore it. I've added heat and air to it, new light fixtures, the columns in the front have deteriorated. We plan on, redoing those with new pressure-treated wood. There was maybe one floor in the dining room that had sagged, and I think we had redone it with like heart pine wood flooring. But I'm just going to try to bring it back to life, really, but it will be just one unit and occupied by one family.
You would consider a condition that it remain as a single family?
Oh, yes, I want it, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to have it. I mean, it's, I believe it's been lived in for 15 months. The couple had moved to Austria on a mission, and so I got, to know the house by the neighbor to the left. And actually, when I closed on it, they gave me a stack of papers about this thick, talking about the history of it from the early 1800s. So I'm pretty excited to have it.
It will be a rental unit.
Yes.
Yeah. How many bedrooms do you have in that?
Well, it's been added on to twice. Actual bedrooms that have closets. I don't know that, to be honest with you. There's probably 7 rooms in the house, but I think there's only 3. I can look and see how it was listed, but I think there's only 3 considered bedrooms. It was a long rectangle house originally in the 1800s, and then there's been 2 or 3 additions. Maybe one was done in the 50s, and another one was done in 76, I think was the last one that I saw. The previous owner in the late 90s had put hardy plank siding on it and updated the windows. But when I bought it, it was full of plug-in heaters. That's how it was heating the house. And those window units for every room. So there was like 7 or 8 window units. So it was pretty,
So how much real historical appearance do you have when you got hardy plank on it, replacing all these things? Is it really maintaining its look that it once had?
The front of the house can be. The front of the house is pretty neat. I think some stonework needs to be done on the bottom and on the steps. It's pretty depleted. I think once you put a fresh coat of paint on the railings and the columns, I think it'll look pretty close to original. Or from the pictures that I see, that's been given to me in the book, the inside is all original. It's original wood, ceilings are original. They've painted some pretty wild colors. The previous homeowner, I think they had kids. Like the floors and the walls are pretty original, but I think that's the only reason that it hasn't been placed in the Historical Society, from my knowledge, which I'd like to bring them back out to see if it could be, because, I mean, I do enjoy it. I do like the house, you know.
Any other questions? Thank you. All righty. Anyone have any more for Ken? Anything else on that issue?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members.
Discussion of council meeting policy related to discussion and action. Actually, I had asked that be on the agenda, and basically meant to get some handouts, but I'll just mention this and try to have something to you between now and the next meeting. But what I think we also tried this once before, and maybe didn't get anywhere with it some time ago, but I think it would be good for us to have just a resolution or a policy regarding how our work sessions operate as well as our regular council meetings. And we've been able to do this, but I think it would be good if at our, we would certainly designate the first Thursday is our work session. I think that's been done. But it's my understanding now with some of the new requirements under that the legislature has adopted, that we have to post the meeting like a week in advance now. Now, I don't know if they're talking about the agenda only, or I mean if the notice of the meeting or the agenda too. I wouldn't think it would make much sense to say there's going to be a meeting, y'all come, but we're not going to tell you what it is till a day or two before, you know. That wouldn't make good sense to me, but I'm not sure how that is with regard to the law.
I don't think there's a week requirement.
It's a week, isn't it? The new one?
Within the 2 weeks before the meeting.
Sometime before. It can't be so far in advance, but I don't know that you have to be a week ahead of time. But
I believe
I think it says regular meetings have to be scheduled a week in advance, have to be announced a week in advance.
But no, you're allowed, but you're still allowed to, under the old law, to say at the beginning of the year, here's all our regular meetings.
Correct.
And then only if you change it, do you have to get notice. You're allowed to say it's the first and third Thursday.
So the agenda to be posted on the front door, right?
Right, and I don't remember the wording, but it's something
I
like
think it says
sufficient
it's, yeah, as reasonably soon as possible,
Okay.
something to that effect.
I think we're well in compliance the way it's.
All right, well, whatever it is, we need to make sure that any items that the council members, staff want to have, or the city attorney on the agenda needs to certainly get to the city clerk for the preparation of the agenda in adequate time, which should be at least a week, I would think, before, if we want to try to get the agenda packages out, well, we can always a week in advance, so that the council members have adequate time to look them over and study them, and perhaps get a lot of their questions answered prior to the meeting. I think the work session, of course, should be for discussion purposes only, and that there be no official action taken at our work sessions except by declared emergency, in which a majority of the council would vote that it was an emergency, and we would take action at that point. Regarding our regular action session, the third Thursday of each month, the city clerk once again should be notified in adequate time to get these items on the agenda, so that agenda packages could be out hopefully within a week prior to the meeting. Action may only be taken on any agenda item which has first been on the work session agenda for discussion. I think that's pretty important, that we try to make
all action items, where possible, go to a work session and be thoroughly discussed prior to being put on the agenda for the regular meeting. I know we're trying to do that, but I think we need to kind of set that as a goal and as a policy. Number one, it gives the public more notice about what's being discussed, and it also gives council members more time to understand fully the issue before voting on it. Council still at that meeting may introduce any other items for discussion under council introduced items, but that no action may be taken unless the item is declared an emergency by a majority vote of the council. And if you're going to have a council introduced topics, it really should be brought up at the time we approve the agenda and amend the agenda to include that item that you want to discuss that evening. So the agenda must be amended to include any council introduced items at that point. I'd welcome any comments. I'll try to put something together in the next few days totally, but is there any suggestions or recommendations or anything regarding that? I think it's important that we have a policy to do that. I think it'll help everyone better understand what's going on, including the public.
I think you touched on two very important points. First, that I think we have an obligation to inform the public of what we're going to be discussing or taking an action item on. And secondly, by trying to, as much as possible, eliminate the change at the beginning of the meeting to add items to the agenda, this allows each of us time to prepare. It may be a small item, but it may be a significant item, and each one of us then has time to look at that item when we get our agenda packet and prepare for discussion or prepare for the action that we want to take.
Mr. Mayor? Yes. I find that to be, it's going to slow down the process. And already dealing with government is a slow process. And just being a person who sat out in the audience for some time prior to sitting here, I just saw too many situations where things get kicked down the road a little bit when an action needed to be taken. I'm afraid this will take small items, and we've got a few here that we need to take action and start tackling the big ones. So I'm not sure I agree totally. I understand what your point, Mr. Cummings, and it's a good point, but I still feel like we should have flexibility to take some actions.
Well, we do have flexibility if we want to. If the council's willing to declare an emergency, then you can do it.
In other words, if I wanted to place a motion and we were sitting there and I said, this is an emergency and now we're going to place an action item.
Absolutely. If you could make the motion and get a second, the council said that this needed to be acted on now, sure. We could do it in a work session or council meeting. It's that urgent.
Mr. Mayor, depends on who's making the motion.
Well, you'd have 6 people right here sitting making a decision whether it was really something that was urgent or not.
So we're going to vote on whether it's urgent or not.
That's right. Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
I agree with Mr. Huffman. But 2 years into council meetings, 2.5 years, I realized that sometimes that doesn't work. When I first started, I was ready to rush head on. But also I found that, and Mr. Goodwin brought up a good point about this bicycle down at Heritage Park. That came up as an urgent issue. We all went, yeah, we jumped on it, got it painted. Then it came back, we looked at it, then we rescinded our vote, and it just popped out, and we didn't really have time to evaluate. And to me, that's where we have found ourselves in trouble from time to time, because somebody feels this is urgent, I want to have it, and what I want to have is material, background, or input, so we can make a good decision. Now, I don't have a problem with this emergency that we would all declare, But I think that we need to, if anybody wants to put anything on the agenda, council introduced items, then those should be thought out when before the agenda is made and say, I want it on here. And I think we're moving to that, pretty much. But I think it's important. Again, what you brought out about the Heritage Park, we were talking downtown, but that is an issue we need to look at again. So I think that's something that should be put on the agenda and go for it, but not sit and
It is on the agenda.
Well, but I'm saying that type of a thing is what we should do so that we don't jump onto the other issues.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? I will refine this a little bit and get it to you, and then we'll move this to the next meeting, and it'll be your decision at that point. Let's see where we are. I believe we have removed item E, item F, discussion of budget amendment to fund the hiring of the Canton Theater personnel. I recall that we did agree to that back some time ago, and it got left off, I understand, of the budget report. So, do you have any thoughts on that, any discussion?
I might add that I know the gentleman who was hired as the Canton Theater manager and have met with him, and he is very enthusiastic, has a number of plans. He's already requested an audience at the community in which I live to solicit volunteers for the theater, and he's going to be there, I think, in a week or two. But I think it's a good deal for the city, and it's a good deal for the theater.
I think what happened there was at about this time last year, Lewis may remember that, but it was pretty close to a year ago, council did tentatively agree to it, and I think there was an intention that it be placed in the FYE 12 budget. We lost CFOs, had interim CFOs, and it didn't actually get put into the budget.
Yeah. Hey, do we have well, we can't do the motion tonight anyway, can we? It will come up at the next meeting, I guess. But does anyone have any question or anything about that? We have a couple of our DDA folks here that would answer anything that we need. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, the only point I would make, this just goes one step further in showing that the discussion gives us a heads up of an item that we're going to vote on, even though we spent very little time discussing this particular item. We know at the next meeting that we're going to vote on it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Let's see. All right, discussion of walking and bicycle paths in Heritage Park. Jack?
Oh, no, I put that.
You had that one on, okay.
Yeah. I guess Jack and I both got the same email, but, so I asked it to be placed on the agenda, and I'll just read the email, and I won't read the whole thing, but I'll just read part of it. I'm writing to you because of a scary incident my wife and I had today at Heritage Park. A young adult bike rider in his 20s came up behind us and came very close to hitting us while we were walking in the park this afternoon. This was not a casual rider, it was a speed bike, and he was going all out. We walked, well, going on further, he says, unless something changes the park, sooner or later a small child or an older senior citizen is bound to be hit by a bicycle, and the city will get sued. None of us want this to happen. That's a condensed version, but I'd like to, next meeting, it's my intention to make a motion that they'll basically get a bi-directional where we will have bicycles going in one direction on this sidewalk and walkers in the other. Because if anybody's ever been out walking and a bicyclist come up on them fast, it really startles you. Whereas if they're coming at you, at least you can see them coming and be prepared for them passing you by. That will be one thing. The other thing is, and I don't know, and I have talked to Mr. Dyer, as to whether we can limit it to the type of bikes. I don't think we want bicyclists speeding at 30 miles an hour around there, but I don't know if we can do that or not.
Jack?
I would also mention that not only is it dangerous to the people, pedestrians walking, it's also dangerous to the bicyclists, because we already had an incident there where Mayor Ballground, one child veered out in front of him, a child veered out in front of him, locked down the brakes, went over, broke his collarbone. So it's dangerous to both sides, so it's something really needs to happen.
Contrary to what Mr. Beresford said earlier, we all didn't rescind our vote on that. I still voted for the bike lanes. But what I wanted to mention is that I think we should have a bike lane, but I don't think we can, if I understood Mr. Cummins correctly, I don't think we can have bikes going one way and pedestrians going the other, because I don't think we can limit the way people are going to walk on the sidewalk, if that's what I understood. But I think, well, you know, people will ignore the sign, but if we have a bike lane, I think they'd stay in it. But I'll add to that, my son lives in Kensington, Maryland, and he works in Alexandria, Virginia, and he used to drive his bicycle down this narrow path that went through parks and everything else, and all sorts of bikes go through there, and pedestrians, and there are no bike lanes. And we walked down it too and had bikes, they just come, they ring a little bell and you get out of the way. But so it goes either way, but I think in here, I think a bike lane would be adequate. But I don't think we can have one-way signs for pedestrians and one-way signs for bicycles.
You know, it seems to me that normally even when you're walking on the street, you want to be facing the traffic, I would think. You know, I think that's sort of common practice, and I could see where that might work better than where we are now. Is that if the bikes went around to the left and the walkers went to the right, you know, just by sign. Maybe everybody's not going to go by that, but maybe some of them will, and it might improve things. But Mr. Beresford.
With that thought, I support arrow pointing one way for a bicyclist and one way for a walker. And the key part here is we need to know how much paint we're talking about, and I think we had some special paint that was brought up. I would like for Mr. Wood to have Mr. Jimmy, I think that's who would be responsible for that, to give us an idea of having an era with a profile of a bicyclist going one way and how many you need every so often, and era going with walkers going the other way, and how many we would need, and what would be the cost factor of that. So it's pretty well easy to see, easy to follow. The problem with the bike lane is I don't think it's wide enough to have a lot of people down there walking 2 or 3 abreast, and then you have a bicyclist come blowing by. It might be a little crowded. So,
Mr. Mayor, I totally agree with John, is that path, I don't know if you can divide it 50-50. If you do couples walking side by side, it's still going to be too close. But with that said, I'd like just to make an overall comment. I spend a lot of time down at the Y, and when I'm working out, I watch them down there an awful lot, and going back and forth, coming downtown and across the bridge down there. It's a huge, huge park, massive grounds, and they can't have enough room for everybody. Why couldn't we organize a piece of property that is that large that we can have people playing ball, people walking, people riding bicycles, having playgrounds? But here we got this huge park and we got a little bitty sidewalk, and we're trying to get everybody to use it and then make them happy.
That's a good point.
We need to do something with that park. Besides, all we do is cut the grass. And that's one of the biggest maintenance problems. It's just, we're down there cutting grass all day. And we just need to study that park. Maybe we need a park department.
I hate to say it, but we need a consultant, that's what we need. I'm serious. We need someone, a landscape architect that can plan that park for its fullest utilization, including playground equipment and anything else that we need there. We don't have to put everything in there at one time, but we need that plan. That part needs to be planned, and what you're saying is exactly right, that there's an awful lot of space there. It's highly underutilized. And you know, we do know that some of it may be floodway, I don't know, but
We know most all of it's floodplain for sure, but that's probably no big problem. But I think we really need to invest in getting a master plan for that park that we can, over the years and into the future, add to.
I think part of the reason, Mr. Truckman, is that that was a passive park. That's the reason it's remained that way. And I agree with you. Many times I thought, I guess, an easy way, easy place to put children's playground equipment, put a circle outside, let bikers ride outside rather than ride where people are walking. There's lots of things you can do with it. But I don't know if there's some kind of something in a contract that says we can't do that with a passive park or not. I don't know.
Oh, we need to find out.
But we certainly, there are plans that have planned to do some more of that thing. So I guess we can look at those.
That's right. The only comment I might have, and I tend to agree with you, I've always felt that park is sort of underutilized and underdeveloped and kind of ugly. But what I was going to suggest is that we're building a park right across the river. And once that park is going to be connected to this one. And I think the dynamics might change somewhat. It might be premature for us to do something in Heritage Park until the other park is completed, so that we know how the parks are going to interact and how the people are going to start walking, because we might have a trail going some other direction. So that's just...
Yeah, I certainly think it needs to be coordinated there for sure.
Back to, I guess, the original point, I agree with Mr. Beresford, it's a good idea, and I'd like to ask Mr. Wood if he could have ready by the next meeting what that would cost, so that we could sort of put this thing and act on it as quick as possible.
Okay. Are you saying to find out what it was cost to paint the stripes?
Yeah, well, no, not stripes, but Mr. Beresford, if I understand correctly, is going to put an image of a bicycle pointing in one direction and then a walker pointing in the opposite direction every so many feet, so that we indicate it on there, rather than running a line all the way down the middle.
Well, little steps like that will help, but I don't, it's going to be minimal, I think. It's just simply the path is not wide enough.
I guess my basic viewpoint is that at least we've attempted to do something than doing nothing.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to make sure, you still have that?
Yeah, removable thing?
Yeah. So if that's the case, then we
can erase it, is that what you're going to say?
Well, I mean, that's where we need to go in, looking at that in 2 weeks, saying, okay, we can do it. And then things change later on, as Mr. Rush pointed out, that absolutely, we have the other park, we want to make them linked, and we want to have some sort of program that will dictate and carry that forward. So we don't want any permanent stuff down there. But I know it's a little more price than the others, but we need to, that would be what we need to look at and say, well, let's get something up and going to help Mr. Huffman feel like things are moving down the road.
Okay.
Or down the sidewalk.
All right, city manager's report.
A couple of quick items, Mayor. One, I'll make council aware that we did have 7 different water and sewer utility contractors here most of today. They did tour the water plant, they toured the sewer plant, they toured a couple of the higher maintenance lift stations. They met with both of our in-house engineers, Mr. Hatavian and Mr. West, and we're hopeful that we'll have several good presentations back to us before the end of this month on the schedule. Audit was received on Tuesday, I believe, delivered to us on Tuesday. We hope to be able to have that in your packets for the next meeting, and Mr. Bentz, or a representative of our auditing firm, will be here to formally make that presentation and answer any questions that you might have, unless you want to ask those questions prior to the meeting.
Just 2 or 3 things here I wanted to mention is that, of course, our committee that we had with the, let's see, we have a
water billing committee that we had established. I think that one is probably one that we probably don't need any longer, and we'll terminate that committee, dissolve that one. The Charter Council Committee can be dissolved now. So if there's any others that want to make sure that we, I think we had did we have a cell phone committee at one time? We did, I think. So anyway, it's dissolved as of tonight anyway. It's not already defunct. I just wanted to make sure that we
have a reservoir committee now.
Yeah, we have that. Those, I was just talking about the ones that we were dissolving as of tonight. No need to let them continue just to hang out there. You know, they're dissolved. Okay. Next time. Yeah.
One, two, before you get through this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I thought I was two before talking to those. You want to go ahead?
No, go ahead.
A couple of messages I failed to mention. One, the Electronics Recycling Day and Shredding event, that's free, of course, will be this Saturday here at City Hall from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Remember, I think we announced this at the last meeting, but on Monday, May 8th, residences and businesses in the city will receive a telephone message directly from the Code Red system inviting them to enroll in the service. So your citizens can expect that call inviting them to enroll in the service. Thank you.
Rush, I apologize. I skipped over something you had on there.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Well, the first item I had was the discussion of the fire protection referendum, and I put that on the agenda when we were talking about a referendum to build a couple of fire stations, but that was before we had the ISO consultants report, and based on our meetings, we had 2 meetings this afternoon, and based on those meetings, in order for us to maintain our ISO 4 rating, we don't necessarily need to build those stations, but there's also discussion with Cherokee about merging the 2 fire departments. And so those discussions are still ongoing. Nothing has been resolved. I think a referendum to build stations is premature. But what I would suggest to council to consider that is if we decide to, when we start looking at this, to maintain our ISO 4 rating is minimal expenditure, but as the mayor had suggested, pursuing an ISO 3 rating would result in considerable capital expenditure. So if we decide not to pursue the ISO 3 or to go with Cherokee, we should have at least a couple of meetings informing the public, and then possibly put, if we put it to the public in a referendum form to decide whether we should make the expenditure ourselves to maintain our fire department, or to proceed with the merger with Cherokee Fire Department.
The other item, anyone have any comments on
Yeah,
that?
just one clarification is that, and if I missed it, I apologize, but eventually we'll probably have a minimum of 2 new fire stations. It really is the decisions whether we build it or if we should merge with Cherokee, they build it. Am I correct?
Well, that's
part of it, yeah.
But that's part of it. It's a
Well, I know that's part of it.
It was
The part that I'm trying to clarify is that for the audience and the media, is that we're moving forward with the idea of having new stations.
Yes.
That's correct. There'll be, actually, the committee will look at 5 different options, and then the council will say we could vote on whichever option it is, and one of those options is as many as 3 new stations.
I know it. I've seen as many as 2 up to 5, and we know what the answer there is.
Yeah. Mr. Rush, you have
Okay,
next item.
the other item is a little bit...
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
I just want to...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
On the first item there, as you were talking about, I agree. I do not want to rush into something. We just got the first flush of the ISO report. We're going to have follow-ups on that. We've got a bunch of options in there, and I want to make sure we look at all possible options, and we need to take our time. So we need to set a time frame, but I think this is going to require a little bit of time, and I don't know what you were looking for.
No, I'm looking for, us to take our time to
You're
make a
looking for
decision.
room.
And if we want to go with Cherokee, I'm suggesting we do that in a referendum sometime, asking the public if that's what they want to do. The other item is somewhat, I guess it was controversial when Mr. Bryan brought it up, but some months ago, Mr. Bryan talked about eliminating the senior tax exemption, and nobody here was in favor of it except Mr. Bryan. But he did get me thinking about some things, and what I'm going to read some facts, but I'm not advocating anything. All I'm doing is reciting some facts, and I'm going to have a suggestion afterwards. But we provide significant services for our seniors, but I just wanted to put dollar figures to them. We have 1,300 seniors who are receiving a trash pickup, and they're paying $7.50. The city is paying $10.01 for that same service, so it's costing the city $39,156 a year. So that's just one item. Now, on the current property tax exemption, we have 1,231 seniors who receive the exemption, and they pay a total tax of $28,707. If we had reduced the exemption to what Woodstock has at $250, the same seniors would pay $46,408. With no exemption at all, is $588,384 that would be what the city receives in revenue. I'm not advocating anything here, I'm remind you of that. But now, in the fire department, 70% in 2012 of fire department calls were for rescue and emergency services. In 2011, it was 66.5% of the calls. At 1,846 calls in 2011, 440 in 2012. Fire chief estimated that each fire department call cost us $720. So for the first quarter of this year, those 440 calls cost us $110,880. Well, not make mistake here. He estimates that 35% of those calls are to senior citizens in distress. So for 2012, 35% of the 440 calls so far has cost the city $110,880. And in 2011, it cost the city $465,192. Now the other
Question is, are we working on calendar year or on city?
Fiscal year.
Okay.
And then the other item, and here again, this is just a fact that I'm stating, and we recently adopted a procedure for the acceptance of private streets. And there is one community in the city, it's ungated, it's primarily senior citizens. All of the property there is valued at below $200,000, so they virtually pay no city taxes. Now, I'm sure, and I know this community will be coming and asking the city to accept the private streets. So that's, any maintenance of those streets will have to be borne by the residents of the city who don't pay taxes. Now, with all that having been said, my suggestion is, this is a significant amount of services we supply, and that I would suggest, because Canton is in financial straits, as we all know, I'm suggesting that each member of the council, that we appoint a committee that's equally divided between seniors and non-seniors to look at this, just as the mayor had his charter committee, and look at the facts and come back and decide whether we do anything, do something, or do nothing. But at least we give everybody, or give the citizens a chance to look at this instead of us sitting here and trying to figure it out ourselves. And what I would suggest is that each council member and the mayor appoint one senior and one non-senior for this committee, and that we do that whenever we choose. That's it.
Thank you.
Are you fixing to move on?
I am, you got something else?
Well, I just want to
okay.
make a comment in regards to that. I think that the item is a volatile item And I don't want to have a referendum, but I think that thought process, it makes some sense that we can get some dialogue going. And reality is here, this is a reality check. And if we have, you were asking for us to pick from our vast knowledge of the different residents, a senior and just a junior.
A 61-year-old. Senior and a 61-year-old.
No, who's fixed to get over it. But I think that's a good idea, so what do we need to do to,
Well, I
just
think,
say that?
yeah,
Let's bring this over to the next meeting, and we'll, if we decide to make those appointments, that's what we'll do, then, if that's what y'all want to do.
Then I want it back on the agenda for the next meeting.
We put it in form of a motion next week.
It is,
Yes, dear.
sure.
Yeah.
We did. Okay.
Okay. All right. One thing I wanted to announce, were you through? I want to make sure. The Canton Main Street program, once again, has been designated as an accredited National Main Street program for the 3rd year in a row. And I'd just like to make that announcement and congratulate Junior Gerard and all the Main Street Board and those who have worked very hard to make this happen. I attended the workshop, most of the workshop that they had at the Rock Barn recently, and I'll say it was an exceptional program, I think, and Corey Wilson did an excellent job coordinating that discussion, leading that discussion, and I mean, I think we're going to have some good ideas coming out of that, and some recommendations coming to this council regarding the rental tax and other excise tax and other programs and really plans for what this body sees as efforts needed to enhance downtown. So anyway, I do want to congratulate the Main Street Board on their efforts. Let's see, another item that we had is that GMA convention is coming up, and I think probably, I don't know if it happened last year or not, but they won a voting delegate who would represent the city council on issues that will come before the group. It says each member city is encouraged to designate a voting delegate for the annual business meeting to be held during the closing general session on Monday, June 25th from 3 to 4:45 p.m. Agenda items will include the following: adoption of the association's 2013 legislative policies, election of GMA's 2012-2013 officers and board of directors. I would like to ask Glenn, since he's really big on policies, if he would do that, assuming he's going to the GMA meeting. And one other thing I would like to do is, we have not participated, I don't believe, the last few years in the parade of flags. Is that right?
Correct. Correct.
Would this board want that to happen at this time? And so those that haven't been before, what that is, of course, is where you take your city flag and flags from all the cities or that participate kind of at the beginning of the session. They march in, or at some point they march in with each city's respective flag. Is that something we want to do this time?
Isn't that usually the city clerk's job to carry that?
City clerk? I don't know who would someone want to volunteer to do that? You want to do that?
I think Mr. Rush is staying over till Tuesday.
Yes.
I think.
I'll make the motion that we nominate Mr. Rush.
I'd be happy to carry it.
All right, okay. And also be responsible for carrying the flag down, don't forget that.
Can you get me a truck?
Maybe it'll come apart. Looks
It
like
comes
it'll
apart.
then. Thank you, appreciate that very much.
And you also made a recommendation that we did. Mr. Cummings would be.
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah.
Anybody kind of
Anybody have a problem with that?
Well, yeah, I
You
do,
tell
but
him.
but I just wanted to make sure we recognize that.
Okay. We'll let Susan fill out this form if you will, please. Send it in. Another item that you'll see, and you may have already noticed this, certainly is that your agenda package is somewhat different this time. In an effort to save money and save paper, you will need to keep your agenda package for your next meeting, okay? And you'll notice that the agenda itself is separate, so that she doesn't have to reprint and recopy all of the attachments every time, so we will save that. So if you think there's something you want to discuss that's included in the attachments, try to remember to bring it to the meeting next time. If not, Susan will have a copy here that you can refer to if you need it.
What about a two-sided copy?
I guess ours would do that, wouldn't it? Yeah, you could, even, this thing can get even smaller, can it? Okay. I believe that's all that I have at this point. So I guess we would, we have on our agenda an executive session to discuss personnel.
Motion to adjourn to executive session.
Motion, any other discussion? If not, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No. I do not believe at this point that, I have no reason to believe we'll be coming back out. Reason to vote.
But you can.